Welcome to the deep dive. So, today we're tackling a really big one, the energy footprint of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, it's everywhere now, isn't it?
It really is. And you've sent us, well, a whole stack of material articles, bits of research, video transcripts, all trying to get a handle on this. So our mission really is to sift through it, figure out just how much energy AI is actually using, some surprising numbers in here, and really zoom in on those everyday tasks you asked about.
Right, like the NotebookLM summaries, ChatGPT, Grok searches.
Exactly. And ultimately try to answer that question, what difference does my usage actually make?
And it's so relevant right now because AI isn't just a niche thing anymore. It's becoming fundamental.
Right.
And that means we need massive infrastructure, especially power, and that's putting, real growing pressure on energy systems everywhere.
Okay, so let's look at that big picture first. Based on these sources, the headlines around the big tech companies are pretty stark. Google, Microsoft, they're reporting these really significant jumps in their overall emissions, and they're pointing fingers directly at AI data centers. Google's up nearly 50% since 2019. Microsoft was at 29% since 2020.
That's right. And that tracks directly with the electricity needed. I mean, AI needs these enormous data centers. Think like multiple football fields big,
No.
packed with thousands and thousands of powerful servers, specialized chips, GPUs mostly. And these things just guzzle electricity, not just for the processing, but a huge chunk is just for cooling them down.
Yeah, the cooling aspect is huge, and the scale comparisons and the sources are just mind-boggling. One says a single data center complex in Silicon Valley uses as much energy as 750,000 U.S. homes.
Right. Or another one mentioned a Meta data center in Iowa using the power equivalent of 7 million laptops running 8 hours a day.
It's hard to even wrap your head around that.
It really is, and globally. The estimates and the sources vary a bit, but data centers right now are maybe, 1.5% to maybe even 8% of global electricity demand?
Okay, so put that 2% to 8% in context.
Well, 2% is roughly the entire energy budget of the Netherlands. 8% is getting close to Italy's total annual energy use.
Wow, okay, and that's now. The projections are even wilder.
Oh, yeah. Some sources suggest this demand could double, like in just a couple of years.
Double.
Yeah, potentially reaching the energy needs of a country like Japan. And if you look just at the U.S. grid, some estimates are saying data centers could be, 8% maybe, but maybe up to 25% of total U.S. power by 2030.
25%, that's huge. So, okay, why is this happening so fast? What are the consequences here?
Well, the speed is the key thing. It's putting immense pressure on the existing power grids. The sources talk about, potential price increases for everyone soon.
Right.
And just the massive challenge of building new grid capacity and, crucially, new clean energy sources fast enough to keep up. AI demand is just accelerating so quickly.
And the environmental angle, because more demand usually means.
It often means relying on whatever's already there in the grid mix, right?
Yeah.
And as the sources point out, that still often includes a lot of fossil fuels.
So direct climate impact.
Exactly. It contributes to climate change. And some reports even mention it delaying plans to shut down older coal plants because the power is just needed. And then there's water, too. You need significant amounts of fresh water to cool these incredibly hot, powerful chips.
Right, another environmental cost. And what about the companies? They're investing in renewables, aren't they?
They are, absolutely. Billions are going into renewable energy projects, but the sources also show they're hitting setbacks on their own carbon reduction goals.
Why is that?
Because the sheer speed and scale of building out this AI-first infrastructure is, well, it's currently outpacing how fast they can bring new clean energy online specifically for it. It's a really complex trade-off documented right there in the material.
Okay, so that's the massive scale, the system impact. But let's zoom in now, because a lot of you specifically asked about the energy cost of, everyday AI stuff you might do. Getting exact figures is tough. Companies aren't always transparent, but the sources you sent do give us some pretty good estimates based on research. So let's break those down.
Yeah, absolutely. The source looking at specific tasks uses kilowatt hours, kilowatt-hour. And maybe a helpful comparison is thinking about how long that energy could run a standard 10-watt LED light bulb.
Okay, good comparison. So first up, generating an audio summary in NotebookLM, say from 20 minutes of material.
Okay, so for that 20-minute NotebookLM summary, the estimate is around 0.00015 to 0.002 kilowatts.
0.0015.
Okay.
Which, in our light bulb terms, is like running that 10W LED for maybe 9 to 12 minutes. It involves, processing the text and generating the speech. That takes computation.
Okay, 9 to 12 minutes of light. Next question was generating a report in ChatGPT, maybe 500 to 1,000 words?
Right. For a typical report like that, using something like GPT-4o, the estimate is actually quite low now, around 0.0003 to 0.0015 kilowatt.
Oh, okay. So that's even less. Yeah, much less, potentially. That's like running that LED bulb for only about 2 to 9 minutes. And this is where the sources highlight something really interesting.
What's that?
These current estimates are way lower, like maybe 10 times lower than some older figures that were widely quoted. Those older ones were often around 3 watt-hours or 0.0003 kilowatts per query.
So why the big drop?
Well, the sources point to a few things. The AI models themselves are getting more efficient, the hardware like GPUs is better, and importantly, the assumptions are maybe more realistic now about how long a typical answer actually is.
Okay, that makes sense. But there's a catch.
There's a catch. This low number is for generating the report itself. If you ask ChatGPT to base that report on a really long document you upload or paste in thousands of words.
The input processing.
Exactly. That initial processing adds cost. The sources estimate processing, say, 10,000 tokens, think of tokens like little pieces of words, might add about 2.5 watt-hours, so 0.000025 kilowatts. And if you gave it a huge document, like 100,000 tokens, that could add around 40 watt-hours or 0.04 kilowatts just to process the input.
So the input length really matters, not just the output.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, last specific one. Doing a deep search in Grok 3.
Right. For Grok 3's deep search feature, the estimates are, well, conservatively around 0.0001 to 0.002 kilowatts.
So similar to the NotebookLM summary.
Pretty similar, yeah. Like running that LED bulb for maybe 6 to 12 minutes. And the reason, the sources note, is that deep search is just more work computationally. It's doing iterative searches, analyzing stuff.
Synthesizing information?
Exactly. More steps than just a standard query.
Okay, so looking at these numbers individually, 0.0015, 0.0003, 0.001 kilowatt, they sound tiny.
They are tiny.
Especially after we just talked about data centers using the power of whole cities.
Right. Compared to your daily home energy use or driving or watching TV for an hour, these single AI tasks are minuscule. But, and this is the key, that's the energy for one task, for one person, one time.
Which leads right into that core question you asked us. Does my individual search, my prompt to ChatGPT or Grok, actually cause more energy to be used? Or is that data center just humming along anyway?
Yeah, it's a fundamental question, and the clear answer from the sources is yes. Your specific query does directly contribute.
It does.
Yes. When you hit send, it triggers computation in that data center. That computation uses a small incremental bit of electricity, what they call inference energy.
Okay.
If you hadn't sent that query, that specific little calculation wouldn't have run, and that tiny bit of energy wouldn't have been used right then for that purpose.
So it's not like the energy is just sitting there being wasted if I don't use it.
Well, not quite like that. There is a big baseline energy use, definitely.
Yeah.
Cooling systems, lights, networking gear, keeping servers ready, that uses a lot of power constantly, whether you're querying or not.
Okay, the baseline.
But your query adds to that. It increases the computational load and draws that extra small incremental power on top of the baseline. Your individual bit, that 0.00003 to 0.002 kilowatts, is obviously tiny compared to the data center's total use.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely minuscule compared to the enormous energy used to train the AI model in the first place. That training cost is huge, but it's a one-off cost spread over billions of queries. Your search doesn't affect that past training cost at all.
Okay, so my one little search uses a tiny bit more power than if I hadn't searched. But the real story isn't about my one search.
Exactly. Your single query is negligible in the grand scheme. The reason we're seeing this massive energy demand growth, the pressure on grids, the need for all these new data centers that's driven by the collective.
Millions of people doing billions of queries.
Millions of queries every single day. That's what requires building more, running more servers, and consuming vastly more electricity overall. So, skipping one unnecessary search might save a tiny fraction of a watt-hour for you.
But it doesn't really move the needle on the big picture.
Not really. The big trend, the systemic impact, that's driven by the sheer scale of adoption and use across society. And the environmental impact of that big trend then depends entirely on where that electricity comes from. Is it clean renewables or is it fossil fuels?
Right. So looking ahead then, the sources paint a picture of pretty significant challenges. This demand growth, outpacing renewables, grid strain, needing minerals for the hardware.
Yeah, that's definitely a major theme. The pressure points are clear. Demand rising faster than clean supply, competition for resources, keeping the lights on reliably in an AI-powered world. It's a complex picture.
But are there, bright spots, any potential solutions or hopeful signs mentioned in the material?
Yes, absolutely. It's not all doom and gloom. One really interesting angle is the potential for AI itself to help manage energy better.
Using AI to solve AI's problems.
Kind of, yeah. There are examples like a Google AI that apparently cut data center energy use by 15% quite a few years back. So AI could potentially optimize grids, balance supply and demand, that sort of thing.
Interesting. What else?
Well, there's ongoing work to create more energy-efficient AI models, smaller models that need less power. There's the corporate investment in renewables we talked about, though the location and timing matters a lot.
Right.
And we're starting to see regulators pay attention, like proposals in Ireland suggesting new data centers might need to help fund equivalent new grid capacity.
So maybe some checks and balances emerging.
Possibly. You could almost see it as a kind of horse race, as one source put it. A race between the rising energy costs of AI and the potential benefits, including maybe even AI helping solve the energy issues it's creating.
Okay, so let's try and quickly recap this deep dive then. AI undeniably has a big and rapidly growing energy appetite.
Huge.
It's driving electricity demand, straining grids. But when we look at those specific tasks you asked about NotebookLM, ChatGPT reports, Grok searches the energy per individual query is actually pretty small.
Especially compared to some older, higher estimates for things like ChatGPT, yeah.
And yes, your individual query does use a tiny bit of incremental energy. It's not free.
Right. But the main issue isn't your single click.
It's the collective demand. Billions of queries from millions of users driving systemic growth. And the impact really hinges on the energy source, clean or dirty.
Exactly. Big challenges, but also potential solutions, maybe even involving AI itself.
Which leaves us with a really interesting tension, I think, pulled from all this material you sent. Well, you've got AI's incredible potential, right? Maybe it could revolutionize energy grids, optimize everything. But you've also got its massive and growing energy thirst right now.
Yeah, that's the core dilemma.
So how do we navigate that? How do we balance pushing forward with AI innovation against the urgent need to decarbonize everything? Is the main bottleneck just technology? Can we make things efficient fast enough? Or is it more about the choices we make, regulations, investments, how we decide to use this powerful tool?
That's the multi-trillion-dollar question, isn't it? A lot to chew on there.
Definitely a lot to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into AI's energy use. Keep digging into those questions.